Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. So today we're going to try out a brand new plugin by Acustica called Jet. Now Jet is a dynamic EQ. And I think they have, how many is it, Eric? 3 versions of this plugin? 4 versions of the plugin. 2 of which, is that correct? 2 of which are free. So we're going to try out the free ones first, and then we're going to get to the paid ones. They are doing an introductory price, apparently, of 99 euros. Now, Acustica, we've used before, and they tend to be some of the highest quality plugins out there, as you know. What ends up happening, though, of course, is they can use a lot of CPU. So we're going to experiment. So there's a Jet and a Jet Mix, and then there is a Jet Mix ZL and a Jet ZL. And those are the ones you pay for, I believe, and the others you get, the other 2 you get for free. So let's start with the free ones and see how many instances we can use and see how they work. And then we'll load up the mix bus and have some fun with it. And of course, you can enter to win one of 3 of the whole bundles. All right, I'm going to start with a kick drum here. I've got the kick being subbed together. Let's have a listen. Now, there's no samples on this at all, so this is very natural. So I think for those of you like myself that are recording a lot with natural instruments, this will be an interesting test. So what I like about dynamic EQ for cutting, for instance, is let's just take a kick drum here where we might want to get in there and get rid of some of that low mid at about 350, 400, where it can get a little ugly sounding, cardboard box sounding, if you like. Maybe when the drummer plays it really softly, you don't get as much. You get a lot more low end out of it. But when they maybe put the beta into the head, that's when it gets a little ugly. So a dynamic EQ doesn't just take out the same amount each time. You set it so if there's more excessive amounts of low mids in there, it takes more of that out. That's what makes dynamic EQ a lot more fun to use than traditional EQs. So we're going to start with the Jet Mix. This is the most basic one they have. And as you can see, there's algorithm, meaning, digitally controlled EQs here. Oh, they've got analog ones. That's interesting. And here they've got sampled ones. Okay. All right, I'm going to go for honey low mid because that's usually what I'm cutting on a kick drum is the low mid area. Let's have a listen. So compression and expansion. It's kind of nice. Bypass. All right, that's really, really nice. So I've actually gone in there probably around about 60 and boosted. Bypass, out of bypass. Okay, great. Now let's do the opposite. Let's go in about 300 or 400 and cut here. Bypassed. Dramatic difference. Even if I level match it to the best of my ability. That's pretty level matched. Before, after. Okay, all right, good, free, dynamic EQ, sounds great. Well, that was easy. Let's check it out on the snare. Still got the kick playing, but why the heck not? So I've moved the reverb sound to the snare sub now. Bypass. Cool. So we've used it to successfully compress the low mids inside of the kick drum, to boost the low end of the kick drum, and boost the low end of the snare and the top end of the snare. Yeah, sounds great. So the beauty, obviously, of the dynamic EQ is it's doing it intelligently. So you're setting up a threshold and it's then compressing the EQ as you set it. All right, so let's listen to the whole track. So what's interesting about this when you're using dynamic EQs on organic instruments, when I first started talking, I was saying that, dynamic EQs get used a lot on modern pop mixes, and they do. But what's interesting about them is when you're using them on drum sounds like this with 0 samples. So I almost feel like this video could be called, dynamic EQs. Does it get rid of samples? I mean, don't get me wrong. I love using samples if it's what is necessary to take the drum sound to the next level. But it does seem like a good dynamic EQ is going to solve a lot of those problems, because it's going to equally boost, the high end on the snare, the lows on the snare, the low end of the kick, and of course the low mid cut that we've done. It does sort of help the snare and the kick compete in a world of samples. So that is an interesting sort of use for it. Okay, let's check out the bass. Let's see what we can do to get this bass to be a little bit more fuller. It's got some limiting on it at the end. So let's actually, after that, let's just grab the jet mix. I'm going to analog peak. Let's try that. Bypass. Nice. We're not using external sidechains here at all. Okay, let's go into some mids at about 700 or 800. Gives it a little bit more nose. Bypassed. Try and match the volume for those people that are worried about volume changing their minds. So bypassed. Okay, volume's pretty identical. Maybe bring it down one more thing. Cool. All right, so now we have 3 instances of the jet mix on. Now, let's go and get to the master bus. So the Jet ZL. Take me, take me, take me. Okay, so, let's have some fun. I've got the static EQ, I can turn it on. Stereo link. I'll get to that in a second. Oh, okay. Okay, I can hear that thump coming in now. Bypass. Nice. Makes quite a big difference. Bypass. Let's having a quick look at some of the presets. Warm mix. Bypass. Wow, a lot of presets here. Low D mud. That's cool. Antimatter gravity. Bypass. It's gone for some mid-range stuff. 3D inverse smile. Pretty hyped, yeah. So you can definitely tell the high end there's being hyped. So it seems like a no-brainer. Download it for free and see what you think. I feel strongly just download it for free and try it out. And if you like the sound of it and it makes sense with your setup, then get the full bundle. But this is really nice that they have a free version that you can try and use. Their stuff is, Acustica stuff always sounds super musical. I've never heard anybody complain about the quality of what they do. The discussion has always been the fact that being one of the best sounding plugins means that it uses a crap ton of CPU. Their reverb is one of the best reverbs I've ever heard in my entire life. The one where it emulates all those rooms was absolutely superb. If you were doing like really beautiful orchestral stuff or organic instruments, and you just wanted to put it exactly in a room and control it beautifully, or you were doing film and TV scoring and sound design, Acustica really is your jam, as they say. It's aimed at a very, very discerning market, a really, really high level, wanting your plugins to be the best of the best, which tends to mean it uses a lot more CPU. I'm sure they're very aware of it. That's been the complaint. But with these free versions, we've got 4 running on the mix so far, and it seems to be running okay. I haven't gone past the 4, but do it. Download the free ones for yourself and see what you think. Let's check out what Matt Lang thinks.
Hey guys, Matt Lang here. Let's check out this Acustica Audio Jet Dynamic EQ. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try it on a master. So I'm just going to take this track, which is a drum and bass record, basically. And here it is without any of, no jet, just sharks, no jets. Kidding. Here it is without anything. And here it is with jet. So it's pretty subtle, but what it's doing, I'm adding a little bit of extra high-end sheen, and I'm also bumping the low end just a little bit. So it just makes it just sound a little bit more hi-fi, which I like the sound of. So let's take a look at how I did it. The first thing is, if we look at the high end, I'm using this Algorithmic Shelf D. That's just the EQ algorithm I chose, and this plugin has a ton of different like preset EQ algorithms built within that. You can use those curves for the 2 different bands of dynamic EQ. So I chose Algorithmic Shelf D, and I just wanted, basically I set the sensitivity and my thresholds just to push it. So every time we get above, we cross the threshold, then since I'm using the right side, my high frequency, I'm using that in expander mode. So that's just gonna boost the highs every time that hits a bar, like it hits the threshold, gets boosted, as opposed to compression. You'd hit the threshold, it would get, cut down. So I have it set to 4K, which is the maximum frequency of this EQ set. And I'm gonna actually push the compression versus expander setting just a bit so you can really hear the extremity of it. But I did it just to add just a little sheen, as if I were, really working on a master or something like that. And I found right around there sounded right to me. And I'm doing a similar process on my low end. And this time around, I have my frequency set to be 160 hertz. And I'm also boosting that a little bit. And let me show you what that's doing. So I found that sounded pretty good to me. And the other thing I should say, with the static EQ, I did a little bit of a bump right here on the high end also. So that has nothing to do with the dynamic section. All that's just actually just a high shelf. So it's a pretty smooth high end. It sounds nice. I do wish there was more visual feedback here. That would make it a little bit easier to know what I'm doing. But it's an effective sounding bus compressor or bus processor between the dynamics and the EQ. It's a nice, easy way to really just give your master that little extra sheen. So that's cool. Then I wanted to try it on a vocal, because I love dynamic EQs on vocals or multi-band compressors. But since vocals are such dynamic instruments, I really like using a dynamic EQ or a multi-band compressor because it's going to be reactive to the dynamics of the voice. So let's take a look at this vocal, and without the jet, this is the vocal.
Still I'm disenchanted, so I stay grounded.
And with jet, it's this.
Still I'm disenchanted, so I stay grounded.
And this time around, I'm using the mix version of jet. So as you see in the GUI, it doesn't have the same metering that you have in the master bus version. That makes sense. This is supposed to be a lighter one. So similarly, this time I use the Algorithmic peak EQ algorithm. And in my voice, I always have a bit of a low mid hump. So being able to basically just notch in at like 240, which I always end up ducking a little bit of, between 200 to 250 in my voice, depending on the song, depending on the key, of course. So I just chose the 240 frequency, and you have that same compression versus expansion control like we had in the other. So in the mix version, or the master version. So I am just compressing that 240 hertz area, or ducking the dynamic EQ a bit. And I'm gonna push it up to expansion, then I'm going to pull it back down to compression so you can hear the frequency it's really hitting.
Still I'm disenchanted, so I stay grounded. Still I'm
So that works. And then the other thing I'm doing with this, I'm also using this a little bit like a De-Esser. And the way I'm doing that is once again, my peak is set to 9K, and anytime that signal is going to cross the threshold, and this big knob in the middle, that's ultimately what's really our threshold. So anytime I cross that threshold, it's going to clamp down at 9K. So, and it's a peak, remember, so it's not going to be a shelf, it's just a peak. And this is how that works. And it's subtle, but it's effective.
Still I'm disenchanted, so I stay grounded.
So let's take this part.
So I stay ground, 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 so I stay ground.
So it's functioning as a de-esser, so it's nice to be able to do both at the same time. So I can, I can control my low mid hump, and I can also control my S's. So that's a nice functional way to do it. And I chose Algo Peak, which is the algorithmic peak, but like I said before, there are a ton of different algorithms and preset EQ shapes. So in this case, algorithmic or analog peak made the most sense for me. So let's take a look also now at using it on acoustic guitars, which is something else that I like using dynamic EQs because acoustic guitars can be a little bit funny. So here are these acoustic guitars, and this is without jet at all. So there are two things I want to clean up there. And it's going to be a little bit of the mid-range, like the low mids are also a little bit boxy to me. And also I'm going to try to get some of those, like those high pick squeals out of there. Or not picks, I mean it's finger picked guitar, but just the finger noise on the strings. I'm going to see if I can dig those out a little bit. So here, once again, I am using the mix version of Jet. And this time I am using it's still a peak, but it's a different peak. This time I'm using optimum peak asymmetrical. So I don't know what shape that really is. It's because it's optimal or it's optimum. So let's just assume it's the best one, right? Anyway, so what I have here is, once again, I did a similar process as the vocal. It's actually ironically the same frequency, 240. But this is just going to be ducking out some of that low mid-range just to clean it up just a little bit. So that's the boxiness we're getting rid of. That would be an extreme setting. That's about right to me. Here's our threshold. So you can see the dynamic lights, or the dynamic lights light up as you push it, just to show you that it is indeed supposedly compressing. So that's how I'm cleaning up the low mids. And then on the high end, I'm basically doing a similar thing as we were doing with the De-Esser. This time I'm doing it at 17K. And the reason is it's like I just want to get these squeals out of the way. These, they're a little bit sharp, like this stuff. If you can hear it, it's just in the really high switch right there. So I'm just trying to get that out of the way a little bit. Actually, there's a better example. So if we expand it, you'll hear it really loud. And that's a bit much because I don't want to dull the guitar. So it's subtle, but it just cleans up that acoustic guitar just a little bit. So it's an effective way. I mean, the nice thing about this plugin, it really, you get two things. You can affect two different frequencies at the same time, which is really helpful. So like, for instance, I kind of hate low mids. I really do. So being able to affect the low mid range as well as the high end at the same time is it's helpful to me. So if you're into dynamic EQs and you like the idea of them, you should check out Jet. It's worth taking a look at. It sounds pretty good. And I love dynamic EQs, so the more the merrier to me. And this is probably a pretty good one to have in your arsenal.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it. Don't forget, you can download the plugins for free. There'll be a link here. And of course, you can enter to win one of 3 of the whole bundles. Thanks ever so much for watching. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios.